Without further ado, let's introduce our panel. I'm Mike Cody, the editor of Colorado Biz, and it's a pleasure to be up here again. And thanks to Dave Taylor and Steve Baker for writing for us. We really appreciate that. We love to have their contributions. Okay, first of all, we have David Johnson, who is a partner and COO at Catapult Growth Partners. Dave Johnson is co-founder of Catapult and has 30 years of management experience from companies such as KPMG, Sprint, Bank of America, Sony, Sodak Gaming, Evolving Systems, and Ncorp. He's been a CEO and a CFO at both publicly traded and private companies. And here's the part I underlined. He was part of the founding team at Sprint. So we'll probably hear a little bit about that. Wow. Jonathan Erb, he's the Chief Marketing Officer at Cocono Incorporated. And if you've looked at Colorado Biz recently, a couple months back, we had something called 50 Colorado Companies to Watch. It was a program done with the state of Colorado and economic development councils throughout the state. And Cocono was one of those companies. So congratulations. John has 30 years of experience in marketing and product management, general management, consumer products, and technology businesses. He's been an executive at large as well as young organizations during the past 4 years. He's been Chief Marketing Officer at Cocono, which develops and markets innovative fabric technologies. Mike Faber is a speaker, trainer, and certified professional coach. He's taught thousands of business leaders to communicate passionately and effectively. He brings the lessons of 30 years in sales management and broadcasting to audiences in a unique style that combines humor, candor, and lessons that can be applied to all walks of life. He is the author of 3 books, including 89 Seconds to Sales Success and 89 Seconds to Leadership Success. I'm already curious about where the 89 seconds comes from. Okay. All right, the first question I'd like to ask, and this came up when I was listening to Mark talk. You talked about you have this great idea, you want to run with it, and then all of a sudden somebody said something negative and maybe you've got a little fear. But what came to my mind is what people face no matter what you do for a living, particularly if you're starting up a company, is you've got this great idea, you're excited about it, and then you have to start doing the grind, the work that you have to do every day that can be very tedious and monotonous. No matter what you do for a living, you reach that point and you have to stay excited about it. John Irving, Hotel New Hampshire, there's a character in that book. He's a coach, and I'll never forget this. It always stayed with me. The coach, his motto was, get obsessed, stay obsessed. How do you do that? How do you get up every day and no matter what, you've got to do something that's, geez, they got me doing this, you know? Maybe you were a CEO before, and now you're in a startup, and you have to clean up the shop when you're done. Jonathan, tell me about how you get obsessed and stay obsessed.
While Mark was talking, I was thinking of a quote that I just was given a couple of days ago about entrepreneurship. And it's the relentless pursuit of opportunity without regard to the resources under your control.
Faith.
Relentless pursuit, I mean, it is absolutely that. And I think the tough part is not getting dissuaded by the challenges and just setbacks that we all face with limited resources, bad timing, things that just don't go as planned. And staying on that relentless pursuit of the goal, making adjustments as necessary to that end destination or how you get there, but keeping a pretty good sight on where you started out to go.
So you're looking for people who are going to come to you with a solution in mind, not that we have a problem.
Absolutely. The understanding of the problem is always really clear. It's what's the darn solution?
Yeah.
Thank you. Mark?
A couple things jump to mind. I've got one of my best college buddies has had a very successful career in medical sales and management, and he always talks about, you've got to do your best to stay away from the negatoids, hang out with the positrons, and try to recruit the tweeners, and what I try to do, I have a buddy that is also an entrepreneur, and every morning, he's my pep talk partner. We talk every morning at 6 a.m. And it's usually just a very quick 5-10 minute phone call. that to just encourage, give hope and confidence to one another. And so, and that's why groups like this, I think, are so good as well. You got to continue to hang out with people that share the same passion, share the same courage to just strike out on their own, and so that's what I really draw strength from, is trying to put a team around me of like-minded people that when I'm down, they'll pick me up.
Mike.
I look at leaders, and so Mac is one of the leaders in my life. You may not know that. I love you, man.
I'll pay outside for that.
Thank you. But I also look at how others view me, and I try to remind myself of that. So this is going to sound very sort of archaic to some of you, but it really works for me. And I look at my life in three specific areas. One is self, one is career, and one is family. Not necessarily in that order, by the way. And each morning, I seek to identify ways that I can improve myself in those three areas. My role as a leader in those three areas. And living that tends to attract people of like mind. And I find it actually, 10 years ago, or 5 years ago, when I was in a profession that I wasn't happy with, it was easy to let the negatoids get me down. And now, frankly, I don't even notice them anymore. And I think it's because I'm paying a lot more attention not only to how others balance their lives, but how I balance my life. And the fact that I now have 2 kids who look to me to walk the talk helps me stay accountable.
David.
We started our firm in January of this year, 11 partners. And as we sat down, and none of us were new at what we were doing. We came together in a new firm. And as we were looking at what we had accomplished and what we had failed in the past as we were putting this group together, we noticed that we put together 9 successful firms. We'd also put together about 20 unsuccessful firms. But we learned from all of those failures. And what happens is it teaches you a certain form of almost gallows humor. And when we get together once a week and we plan our goals for the next week, and sometimes that gallows humor really comes out. But our thought process is, you're starting in one of the worst recessions in the U.S. history. There's only one way you can go, it's up. And we use that as kind of our theme. And what's happened is that we have, in a short period of time, landed a number of clients that are everything from early stage software companies to underwater. And it's because of that positive outlook that we have when we go in and talk to a company and saying, yes, times are tough, you cut back, but what are you planning for your growth? And they look at you somewhat and go, what do you mean growth? And say, that's how you work your way out. You grow your way out. You build strength. And you'd be surprised the number of people that is not in the mindset.
Now, both Mike and Mark, you guys mentioned the negatoids, Well, how do you sift through information that sounds like, they're just being negative versus somebody's trying to tell you something and maybe you should pay attention, that rock's about to fall on you, now you're just being negative. That rock's about to fall on you.
Well, I think sometimes it does fall on you. But I can't control the rocks that fall. All I can control is my reaction to them. And I'm trying to think of an example. I mean, Tom and Deb sort of know this on the side. Getting my energy going to write my first and what ultimately became writing 2 books in the same summer, which, by the way, I would not recommend for anyone who wants to maintain any semblance of sanity or hairline. But getting going, writing those books was really tough for me. It was the spring of '08, and it sounds like a long time ago. It was spring of '08, and I was having trouble getting started. And what I did was, to kind of keep the negative chatter down in my own head, was I posted the books for sale on my website. Now, this was in the books were, as we like to say, in the concept stage, meaning I hadn't done squat. And for the first month, no one ordered the books. I publicized it in my newsletter, no one ordered the books. My wife ordered the books. And I thought, well, she's married to me, so, if she has to wait an extra year for the books, then she'll live with it. And then one day out of the blue, it's kind of like opportunity knocking. I got an order for a book, and it was from a complete stranger. And I thought, oh, now what am I going to do? And that jump-started me. And you know, it's funny, whenever Mark, talks about teamwork, I think not only about the people that I work with, I partner with, but also sort of those unseen partners, those unseen team members that push me to go beyond my limitations. And Amy in Castle Rock was the person who did that for me. When she ordered that book, boom, I was gone. So I posted my third book on my website.
There you go.
If anybody orders it. Then
Did your wife get that one yet?
It's beyond concept stage, but it's still way short of completion. So that's one of the reasons,
start.
one of the ways I stay clear of the negatives.
You know, I think the biggest critic we'll ever have is ourself. And I think that is the biggest challenge. And obviously, I think you need to try to, as much as possible, restrict your access to people that, you know, I think over time you kind of figure people out, and here comes a negatoid, and you want to be gracious and friendly, but you don't want to let them get inside. But the biggest challenge, I think, is, our inner voice that says, why do you think you should be doing this? And that, I think that's natural, though. I don't think that's unusual. I think we all have fear, and so I think you have to acknowledge that. Okay, sure, fear, but I'm not going to allow fear to hijack my dreams. I think it's a daily battle. At least for me, it is. Okay, am I going to allow fear and self-doubt or courage and wonderment to win? And I like to remember the words of Shakespeare. Shakespeare once said, "Our doubts are traitors that make us lose the good we oft might win by fearing to attempt." And so, I think it all starts, what do they say, those 6 inches between your ears, it's the longest journey of your life, And so I think you just have to constantly really check in with yourself as to, is this fear-based thinking, or is this reality, that rock is about ready to fall on my head, So.
Thank you. Jonathan?
Well, I think in an entrepreneurship situation, one of the things that I found most helpful is to have a really good board of advisors or board of directors, depending on where you are in development. And one of the keys to that is so often the board of directors tend to be the people that have loaned you money. And there's nothing wrong with that, but there are other characteristics of those lenders of money that are critically important to the success of that venture. And part of that is good advice, a willingness to help things stay positive and find solutions. And so my encouragement is sort out your advisors, sort out your board of directors very carefully. And those that lend you money, make sure they're bringing something else as well. Because your business needs that. It deserves that.
Thank you. I want to share with you briefly, I was just editing a column by the founder of our company, Pat Wiesner. Wiesner Media owns Colorado Biz, and Pat Wiesner founded the company about 30 years ago. And a couple months back, he started doing a series of workshops, and it's called So You Want to Start a Business. And he basically invited people to contact him if they want to participate. He wasn't charging anything for it. Pat's retired. He just wants to share his wisdom with people. And his column today kind of draws on some of the themes he's been, his column for September, draws on the themes that he's been talking about. And you mentioned investors, Jonathan, and one of the things he talked about was, you have to be so excited about your concept and so confident about it that your investors will stay excited. And that was one of the, as well as a profit and loss statement and just all the realistic things that you need to get it off the ground. But the most important theme he had running through that column was, if you're not so excited about it that you're not sleeping at night, you're not excited enough to keep going with it. How would you augment that?
Go.
I've been lucky enough to have started businesses from scratch as well as in the corporate environment. And one of the things that I looked at when I was starting my own business in Silicon Valley, which I later took public and then sold to Sun Microsystems in 1992, was that we look back, and if we're having any days that we're down, we would say, let's look back at what we've accomplished so far. Look what we've done. Look where we've taken this thing. Yes, there were potholes in the road, but we got over them. And you remind yourself that you can do it. Yeah. And that helps you keep that positive look. And so, there are days when you don't feel raw, but you still have that positive thought in your mind. And you just say, darn it, we're going to get through it. You know, we've invested all of this energy and all of this time, and we don't throw in the towel. Yeah. And it's that mindset that you should go.
Thanks. Anybody else? Mike?
Mark talks about, I get a percentage, right?
You betcha. You betcha.
But Mark talks about, you know, in essence, having to look at the face in the mirror. And when I'm coaching clients, and even when I'm coaching myself, I really stress the point that, you know, in the end, you've got to be able to look yourself in the mirror and say, okay, what am I proud of that I accomplished today? And if you've got one, bless you, if you've got one or two or three things that you can be proud of each day, that builds momentum. And I think momentum is vastly undervalued. I don't think any of these companies get to be big and successful and treat their people right, their internal people and their customers right, if they're not working on small victories to build big victories.
Thanks.
That's a great point about inertia and momentum of successes and building upon those. I think that is encouraging not only to those leading a venture and investors watching it from afar, but it's very important to the attitude and whole nature of the organization within, however small or big it is. One other thing I wanted to mention, there's a fellow up in Boulder who's a serial entrepreneur, Doug Collier. Some of you may know him. He has a term for enthusiastic investors, and he calls it believer capital. And I think that's just
good.
A tremendous term. That's who you want on your team. You want people that are from the believer capital frame of mind.
Yeah. You know, I think, and you were mentioning this in the tough times. You know, I think that's where leadership really, you know, reveals itself. I mean, all of us on this entrepreneurial track, or even in life, you know, it has its ups and downs and everything, and especially if you have people working for you, you know, they are going to be watching you when the stuff is hitting the fan. If you're saying, hey, we're going to get through this is okay, I think that's a tremendously powerful thing, because not everybody necessarily maybe has that belief, and they need somebody to say, hey, you know, we can get through this. Bill McCartney, who, you know, was a huge influence on my life, he'd always talk about, you know, we got some tough sledding ahead of us. But, you know, when you can still rally the troops and say, you know what, okay, you know, we lost, or we didn't get the revenues we were expecting, but here's what we can learn from it. And you're able to turn those negatives into a positive to keep them all moving in the same direction. So I think even in the tough times, when maybe you don't necessarily have the momentum, you can still, I think those times can be wonderful moments to show your leadership skills, but also give them hope, encourage, again, giving them hope and confidence. You know, and I think that it's more important then when you're riding high, it's not really a teachable moment, you know. You don't teach athletes after they've scored 45 points, you know.
But if you have investors, you want to be riding high. I mean, Mike, you mentioned the little victories, and the little victories get you through day to day. One of the themes in Pat's column I just referred to is that investors want you to think big. So you're in your garage and you're starting something out, but as soon as you take somebody else's money, you're getting them excited. They want to take this thing all the way.
Yeah.
So how do you keep doing that?
Yeah. How do you keep them riding high?
How do you keep it hot? How do you keep it moving?
Asking me?
I'm asking whoever wants to.
You brought up the point.
Shoot, yeah, I guess this one's on me.
How do you transfer the little victories to the big victories?
I think what you do is you take time to recognize the value of your achievements. So I work with people, just an aside, I'm a coach, along with being an executive and a presentations coach. I'm a coach for Anthony Robbins, for Tony Robbins, 6'8", big teeth, reality show star soon to be. And one of the things I've learned from Tony over the years is that far too many of us give ourselves no credit for victories, but are more than willing to jump on top and beat ourselves down when we make, the one small mistake. So what you don't, the deep dark secret is Mark and I met when we were competing sportscasters in a faraway galaxy known as South Texas. It's like 25 years ago. And, in television, I'm going to tell them the secrets.
Go ahead.
Okay? So you put makeup on and all the lights are adjusted and you've got a script on the camera. Yeah, that's what they gave to me. I don't know if they gave them to you. Some causes are beyond hope. Yeah. But when you do that, in an artificial environment, one little mistake, in a 3.5-minute sportscast or whatever it happens to be, can sink your whole day or your whole week or your whole month. And you can obsess about that. Not me, but other people can obsess about that.
Now, you were always flawless.
Well, yeah, I tried. And so I think one of the things that we all have to work on is this idea that we've got to be perfect all the time. And frankly, when momentum lags, as Mark said, that's an okay time to regroup, and take a look at how things are, how you're doing things. Michael Gerber wrote a great book called The E-Myth Revisited. I'm probably not the only person here who's been influenced by that book. But one of the things that he points out is, you got to spend time as an entrepreneur in each of at least 3 different categories: the technician, the manager, and the visionary. And so if your momentum is lagging, if the negatoids are getting you down, then in all likelihood you're ignoring one of those 3 areas. Chances are, frankly, I know for me, the part that I ignore the most is the visionary, which, oh, by the way, is why I got into business in the first place. Don't know if I answered your question, but those are my most passionate feelings on that subject.
Thank you.
I would like to share a story about how the importance of cheerleading comes into play in an organization. Early on, I was a young pup and part of the startup team in Sprint, and our CEO was quite the cheerleader. We were taking on a juggernaut called AT&T, which had the monopoly across the country at the time. And he was quite the cheerleader, and all the way through the organization. And we were focused based on his cheerleading and sometimes his rants. And he got people believing that we were on a mission from God. Saturday night, I was a 26-year-old IT director. On a Saturday night, I could walk into the building at 10:30 and find half of my programming staff there.
Wow.
And they were there because they were motivated. They were sharing a vision. About a year later, strategically, we had determined that fax machines were the next big thing. Fax machines at that time needed data grade lines. So we set about building the first digital network across the United States to support fax machines. We were partially correct. After $50 million, we saw that the market was telling us that fax machines would become big when they worked on voice grade lines. They could work on any line going in the office. So we're sitting around wondering, we've just spent $50 million, what are we going to do? We got this big pile of lemons, we're all going to be fired. And we had gone from basically 40 employees to 1,800 employees by that time. One of the people sitting in the marketing group said, well, we just have to repackage the story. And we thought, well, how do we do that? About 4 months later, we came out with an advertising campaign that said, so clear you can hear a pin drop. Anybody remember that?
You betcha.
That launched the company. We went from 1,800 employees to roughly 5,000 employees over the next year. We went from roughly 1,200 customers to a little over 35,000 in 1 year. And it was making margaritas from those lemons that really launched the company. All along, we had a cheerleader saying, we can do it. Keep the faith, keep the vision. And we did.
I certainly look back on my life, and I've had so many influential people, coaches as I like to call them, whether they were actually athletic coaches, they were friends when I'm going through the divorces that were encouraging me, whether people from my television career, whatever. But to me, that word encourage is such a powerful word, defined as to give hope and confidence to. And that's exactly what was going on there. And I think it's, can you imagine if we just kind of dedicated our lives to encouraging one another? We all walked around with hope and confidence that despite the lemons of life. And so, and I must admit that there's a lot of people say, Magatosh, you are so naive, and you are, all these soft skills, but, that it's just, I think this is the way a lot of people in here are as well, but then again, that gets into the negatoids that will tell you that that's not important. The soft skills don't matter. Well, that's a perfect example that the soft skills had everything to do with it. That fosters an environment that let's keep working at it. And then somebody, the light bulb just went off and said, hey, let's go. And look what happened. And so, you just got to keep encouraging one another. Home, work, or community.
You have a product's pitch spokesperson kind of opportunity, though. Margaritas, as much as I love margaritas, there's a product called Mike's Hard Lemonade.
Let's talk afterward. I don't know if anybody else has this, especially as entrepreneurs, and we're usually, we're doing 18 different things because we're, Victory Productions is me, And so it's wonderful to be around like-minded people that, sometimes you can't see the forest because of the trees. You're so wrapped up. So again, I applaud you all that, you're busy, but you take time to come together and you can draw strength and ideas from one another.
So the thing that always concerns me when I hear people talk about working Saturday at 10:30 p.m. and stuff is what I don't hear work-life balance. And I think that that's a really challenging thing for zealous entrepreneurs. And I'm wondering if maybe you guys can address how you actually have a life in the middle of all this, because otherwise, you guys know very well what happens is your actual life collapses because you're so focused on work you don't have any time to give to anybody else. So if you guys can address that, and then we can go into some other questions. And just as a reminder, if you have a question, if you can stand up when you ask the question, that helps people know who the heck's talking. So thank you.
For me, it's sports. It's having a goal that I'm training for, and it serves as a metaphor and something I can see fairly frequent changes and improvements and have a destination. I'm moving towards that. And it being in the physical balances out the mental part of the other demands. So that works for me.
Certainly exercise is a big part. I'm a big believer in a sweat a day, keeps the doctor away, and I got to get my daily sweat in that kind of clears my head. And then also I just try to really trust my intuition when because I'm thinking about my business all the time, but when I begin to start feeling tired of thinking about my business, I know it's time to just walk away and go do something else, because I know I'm not being productive then.
For me, it's those three spheres of influence. And in order they are family, self, and career.
I think that I'm probably an example of having learned things the hard way, having spent 25 years in Silicon Valley before coming out here. Very focused on building businesses and making things happen. And it got to the point where I spent much more, it was either my business or it was my daughter's. Well, the problem with that trying to balance that is I left one person out, my wife.
Yeah.
And over a period of time, we became estranged, and of course a divorce happened. And sometimes it takes that wake-up call. And I had to learn that the hard way. And then started balancing that from there. And I can tell you that, Mark, having raised two daughters, it can be done.
Okay. It's not going to get worse?
Well, let's put it this way. When they're 12, you swear they'll never live to be 13. And when they're 15, they'll never live to be 16, but it happens. You try to get that balance. Part of the problem is that quite often when you're leading your business, you will think about the balance of your employees, but you won't think about the balance for yourself.
Yeah.
And that's where you have to pull back. I also use exercise
Yeah.
as that way to balance it out.
Yeah.
You know, I've struggled with dealing with various startup ventures in my life, and even nonprofit is really a startup venture. It's working the same way, same problems. Funding, financing, not enough of you to go around. And then I remember having some conversations with my wife when I did some other ventures, and she goes, "How much money you spend in a month?" I said, "Well, I'm spending X number of dollars." "How much money you bringing in?" "Not enough to cover what I'm spending." "How long is this going to go on?" "Oh, let's see, maybe 18 more months. And when am I going to see a return on this? And by the way, you're pissing away all of our savings, you're pissing away all of our income." And then sometimes you get down to the point and you say, "Gee, you know, I don't have much left." Have any of you guys got that far down, and how did you deal with it with your family?
Yeah, I guess I can say something about that because we just started our company in January and I'm funding it. And the approach that I took was putting together a plan for the first 12 months and letting my wife know what that was going to take and make sure that she was comfortable with that. And there was some negotiation, believe me. Part of that negotiation is that in that 12-month period there had to be 2 vacations. And very important from the standpoint of the balancing the lifestyle and, quite frankly, renewing the relationship. And that was planned in advance.
Yeah, that's a tough one. That is tough. I mean, I think if it's the kind of venture I like is one where you're pacing your growth in relationship to the resources you have and the income you're able to generate, so you're growing organically. But oftentimes that's not fast enough, and you have to go out and get venture capital money, and that changes the whole game. It adds exponentially to the pressure and tenseness of getting results in. And most often they aren't going to meet the needs of the venture capitalists. You know, they get dissatisfied pretty quickly. So I think it's a tough balancing act. I think having the absolute best possible communication with your investors that you can have is one thing that must be done as you're building a business and you're still in the red, haven't hit the black yet. It's letting them know where you are, what you're doing, what you plan to do, the mistakes, things you've learned from them, and just being completely transparent about how the business is developing. And then hope for a lot of forgiveness and tenacity on their part to stick with you. But it's a tough balancing act. Yeah, that's a good question.
My situation, I think, is a little different. You know, I've never dealt with venture capitalists, angel investors. I don't really know that world. Sometimes I think I'd kind of like to know it, but then when I hear about all the, I don't know if I want to know that or not. But I have a darling girlfriend that we've been together for almost 6 years, and she's a very successful corporate person, and I'm just out here, so far out on a limb in terms of her world, and I just try to, when I start having fear and self-doubt, I try to get back to the core of things and just truly believe that, all these different twists and turns, didn't really want any of them, they've become real blessings, and just try to stay focused on that and just kind of walk in faith that, when, it seems like when you're wondering how in the heck am I going to pay the mortgage next month, boom, the phone rings and you book a speaking gig, So I think it just takes a lot of courage sometimes. But balancing that against reality, I mean, you can't be, ignorant of the facts, but, and it takes, especially if you've got a spouse or somebody, I mean, it takes tremendous cooperation and understanding and expectations and communication and the whole 9 yards.
This took me a couple of minutes, that's why I passed the microphone over. When I have faced a situation like that, and like Mark, I don't have a whole lot of experience with venture capitalists and stuff like that, or angel investors, but what I have done is typically that type of moment in my entrepreneurial career has been preceded immediately by me trying to do too much on my own. And those are the times when I start to seek out, I have that spark of realization, and I start to seek out partnerships, start to make alliances with like-minded people, and that invariably helps the bad times go away. So.
I was visiting in Florida Mountain in Massachusetts in the Berkshires, and we were staying in this beautiful old kind of motel place, and they had little cabins across the side of the mountain. And I heard this guy playing guitar in the back of his pickup truck, and the sound was coming just really, really clear because we were on top of this hill. And he sounded really good, and he was singing a blues song that he obviously made up. He's singing about his dog, but he sounded really good. So I walked over there with my cup of coffee, and I said, you know, you sound as good as a lot of guys I hear in bars and I pay money for. And he goes, yeah, but they're a lot more ambitious than I am. and you know, that's what it comes down to. We had Mo Siegel, one of the founders of Celestial Seasonings, as a guest in a chat, business chat we had at the Daily Camera when I was over there. And somebody asked him, what does it take to be an entrepreneur? His answer, 13 hours, 6 days a week. You know, I mean, I've never owned a business. I don't know if I would pay that price, yeah. But those are decisions that you tend to end up coming to face.
Good advice tonight, Mark, on working in a positive framework, and good advice from other members of the panel. Let's look at the dark side. I think we're becoming more divisive as a society. Our competition is becoming more extensive because of globalization, because of fragmentation of national markets, because of a large recession, meaning you have to be more effective at competition, which means you have to be, in some ways, more aggressive, more of a kill attitude, I guess I could say. Mm-hmm. So, what are your recommendations? How are you looking at the competitive marketplace, and how are you adjusting if, in fact, we are seeing some changes in it?
A couple of thoughts. One is I'm being more proactive about the modes within which I offer my services. So books, CDs, videocasts, leveraging speakers bureaus, things like that. And the other thing that I do that offers a little bit of a twist on this, I think, is that I try to make my enemies my friends. And what I mean by that is I'm in sales and leadership expertise and training. And you know, Google sales and leadership, and you come up with, I don't know, 47 million hits or something. And so I'm trying to form those strategic alliances with people with whom, in better times, frankly, I would be competing against. And now in darker times, as you put it, we're looking to form alliances that make us both stronger. So I view it as an opportunity.
I have a client that I asked him to focus on 3 sets of numbers. The first set is he has 600 customers. The second set is he has 1,800 employees. The third set is he has 14,000 shareholders. If you focus on that first 600 and get to know them better and get to know what they want and spend more time doing that than your competition, even though your competition could be from a large conglomerate or could be coming from overseas, by getting to know those customers and be willing to move quickly and not be bogged down by bureaucracy, you're going to succeed in a down market like this, and you're going to position yourself for considerably more business when it turns around, and maybe you can make that 600 customers, 1,600 customers. It's basic blocking and tackling, but it's paying attention to who pays your bills.
The last 2 entrepreneurial ventures I've been involved with pertain to performance fabrics. I don't think there's an industry in the United States that's been harder hit than textiles in terms of change and the dark side of the economy. So much has shut down and moved offshore, and jobs have been lost to lesser cost producers. The last 2 companies I've been involved with were technology, were an adjustment to that in the sense of develop a technology that is here, that is produced there through their low-cost means, that is licensed to brands worldwide. And it became a pretty good business model. And I think that was an example of an adjustment to a changing environment. Instead of being a brand of apparel produced here and having the brick and mortar and all of that we used to think of. It's a shift, but it's an effective one that has allowed two companies to prosper over the course of 15 years now.
I think in these down times, in the dark times, I think it's a very critical that you really start analyzing where exactly you're spending your time. And, I speak, I write, and I coach. And then within that, begin to really look at, how much time am I spending in each one of these quadrants, and try to be limited only by my imagination and not my fears, in creating ways that maybe I'm dismissing revenue streams within those three quadrants, and the website, obviously for me, is to, how can I package, my weekly pep talks with, my books, and just without necessarily making it be a 13-hour, 6-day-a-week. How can I create different products, so to speak, that might be enticing for people, be of value to people that they want to purchase? So I think in the downtimes, I think it's absolutely critical to take a look at all your operations and figure out where there's excess, and be strategic and have the guts to try to some different things.
So I think in the business you're in, particularly, this concept of balance is really overrated. The better concept, I think, is maybe this concept of flow, where you get into something and you lose all track of time and lose track of your surroundings. That's been described in a couple books by Michele Csikszentmihalyi at Claremont. Just wondering, to what extent have you experienced that, and how important do you find that in the work you're doing?
And Paul, I touched on this a little earlier. I think, when you're in the flow, you sometimes work 16, 18 hours and you're energized. And then there's other times when you're not in the flow and you've worked 5 or 6 hours and you say, my God, I got to get away from this. That's why I think that's the intuition. But then again, balancing that against the realities of, am I doing enough today to create the revenue I need to, So, but I'm definitely big about the flow.
I spent 17 years in large corporations, sacrificing balance. And for a long part of that, I wasn't married. And for a longer part of that, I didn't have kids. And I have built-in triggers now. I know that 8 o'clock is bath time and bedtime. And
for you or the kids?
Yeah, well, actually for both.
Okay.
Lately. But there's nothing, and I'm a little emotional about this, there is nothing I will ever do that is more important than that. I'll leave it with that.
Well said.
Yeah, I believe when you're on a roll, keep it rolling, until you literally run out of ideas or just run out of energy. And I also agree that sometimes you just can't get over that hump, and it's best to leave it alone. I like what I do, and sometimes I really get excited on a project, and so I still occasionally pull all-nighters. Matter of fact, I did one last week. I was in the middle of a project, and I was excited about it, and I'm just flailing on the computer, and ideas are coming, and away I go. And then my wife walks in and says, how you doing? And I said, oh, I just got these great ideas. And she says, well, okay. And she opens the curtain, and it's daylight.
Wow.
And I wasn't ready to stop. But fortunately, she knows me well enough to know that this is going to happen occasionally. But she also occasionally reminds me that I'm 60 years old and I just can't do this stuff all the time.
I also find the stuff that I write at 2 a.m. I think is really brilliant. And the next morning, I'm like, what the hell is...
Jonathan, Mark, Mike, and David, thank you so much.
Thank you.